I recently had the opportunity to test drive 6 different EVs back to back, all over the same route, as brief as it was, and you may have seen others in this series, but today it's the turn of the Tesla Model 3 long range, the M3. Is it 3, or is it Elon Musk do better? Who knows? Watch the film and find out. Hello and welcome to another episode of Our Wolfie's Wheels. I recently had the opportunity to test drive 6 different new EVs, all back to back, over the same 10-mile route on the same day, to see what I thought of them. The route incorporated some 20 mile an hour with sleeping policemen, some conventional 30 mile an hour limit stuff, 40 mile an hour limits, B roads with no restriction on it, and dual carriageways with the 40 limit and 70 limit on. So although it was only a 10-mile blast in each of these cars, it did give me the opportunity to try them all under various circumstances. And I drove them as if I owned them, because I wasn't really interested in seeing how fast they were, or I know how fast most of them are, or what the performance envelope could be pushed to, because, you know, like probably 99% of you out there, if you're honest with yourself, you generally just get in your car and you troll from point A to point B, and you're not exploring the limits of grip and pushing it to lift off oversteer or lift off understeer or whatever. You know, it's all very well on top gear, but that's not how we drive on the road. So I just drove perfectly normally just to see what the cars might be like if I wanted to drive one on a day-to-day basis. So this time it was the turn of the Tesla Model 3 long-range so-called Highlander, which is the latest iteration, slightly facelifted version of the Model 3. If you've been a member of the channel or looked around the channel at all, you will see that actually we did own a Model 3 long range back in 2021. So it's a car with which I was fairly familiar, and I was just interested to know whether or not the refinements that the Tesla had made for the Highlander had really translated into anything material on the road, and because they've improved the suspension, they've improved the noise suppression, and various other things. I mean, if you want to ever see films on electric cars, there are thousands of Tesla videos out there, all from people who are much better equipped than I am to talk about these things. But I really wanted to see, was it any good or not, or had they ruined it? And very controversially, of course, they now don't have any stalks. So the indicators are on the steering wheel, the headlights, the wipers, everything is on a steering wheel, as opposed to having stalks. And indeed, you can't even drive the car off without using the screen, because there's no stalk to put it into drive. So is it any good? Well, watch the film and find out. Now, if you've watched the other films in this series, you'll know that I wasn't actually allowed to do any filming while driving. So the footage that you really see is just me walking around the car. And I still think that the Model 3 is a handsome looking car, particularly in this red colour, which is an apt cost option. This was the only option fitted to the car that I drove. So I took it out on the road, and what did I think of it? The first thing is that there is no gear lever or selector to put it into gear. It's just on the screen, and you just literally swipe the right part of the screen, as in the correct part of the screen where it's shown. If you want to go forward, you just swipe up for forward. If you want to go backwards, you swipe down to go backwards. And if you want to stop, you push P in the middle to park it. And that's your gears. There is also with the car a built-in bit of AI which actually anticipates which way you might want to go. So for example, where I was parked, I had a fence immediately behind me, so it automatically shifted into drive forward because it knew I couldn't go backwards because there's a fence in the way. So I'm not going to go backwards, am I? Now, you might think, well, maybe I wanted to get a bit closer to the fence. Well, of course, you might, and you just swipe it down to put it into reverse. But the car kind of thinks, oh, I think you're going to go forward to go out, so I'll put it into first for you, or drive for you, which it did. And that was great. So we set off, and it was raining at the time of this particular test, so I had to use the press button on the steering wheel to activate the wipers, and then once I'd activated the wipers, they wiped, which was fine. Being familiar with Teslas, I knew that I could actually put them onto auto, and on our Model Y, the auto wipers seem to be possessed by Satan, and sort of whether they're wiping or not doesn't seem to really bear much resemblance to the quantity or quality of the rain or the speed you're going. They can jump on a fast wipe speed in broad daylight and with no rain, and equally you can be driving through a monsoon and they may think, oh, I'm not going to bother, it's wet out there, I'm not going out there. So had they improved that on this Model 3? And the answer to the wiper question is no. They're still possessed by Satan, so in the end I just used the button to wipe as and when I wanted to. So anyway, we set off and we went on this sort of choppy surface that other cars had been challenged by it, and it was just serene. Absolutely superb. It just drove so nicely. It was quiet, it was refined, da-di-da-di-da. It was a Model 3, but better. Very impressed. And I came up to the first roundabout, and of course the indicator stalk isn't there, it's just on the wheel. And a lot of people have been sort of criticising this move as being, oh, I couldn't possibly have a car that doesn't have the indicators on the stalk, blah, blah, blah. Well, to be honest, I drove this car for 10 miles. I made not one problem with it. And bearing in mind that I'd been in and out of 5 other cars on this day. And it was immediately got used to it. It was a non-issue, absolutely nothing to worry about. The big question is it better? Well, frankly, no, it isn't. Why did they do it? Who knows? Is it a problem? Definitely not. And if you're thinking, I don't want a Model 3 because it hasn't got any stalks, please go and try one and you might surprise yourself. You still might not want one because it hasn't got stalks, and that's absolutely fine with me. I'm not bothered. But don't be put off by the fact it hasn't got stalks. It's a non-issue in reality. So anyway, driving along in this car, and yeah, it did everything that I expected a Tesla to do. It was quiet, it was refined, it was fast. It was not too shouty on the aids. I mean, on this road, I may have seen the Volvo film. The Volvo had me pitching and lurching all over the road as it was correcting me all the time. Horrible. The Tesla just didn't bother. It was fine, as was in fact every other car I drove on that same road, in the same manner, on the same day, at the same speed. So that was great. So overall, the Tesla just drove perfectly. So yeah, a big thumbs up from me for the Tesla Model 3. So in common with all the other films, what's the range like? Well, you can see from this, you've actually got the options of rear-wheel drive, a long-range rear-wheel drive, a long-range all-wheel drive, and a performance all-wheel drive. And the rear-wheel drive is the, for want of a better expression, worst of the range at 318 miles. Performance all-wheel drive will give you 328 miles, which isn't a massive improvement, although it's a much faster car, and £20,000 more. The long-range all-wheel drive will give you 390 miles, and probably the best of them all for range is the long-range rear-wheel drive, gives 436 miles. Now, all of those mileages are, of course, in accordance with government tests, and you may or may not reach those mileages in real life. What I will say is that in our experience with our Model 3, the Model Y and the Model S, we have always been able to get very near to those numbers, occasionally more than those numbers, and in winter and uncertain circumstances, less. So it's a bit like MPGs for cars. You don't always get the 45 MPG that it says you're going to get. Sometimes it will be 35, sometimes you might get 50 on a run. But overall, as a benchmark, yeah, that's pretty impressive. So that just brings us on to cost. So the cost of the car is, in round numbers, £50,000 if you don't go for the red option paint. And if you put a £5,000 deposit down over 4 years, it will cost you £662 a month, which is not cheap at all. But, it's a £50,000 car. So we now think about the charge rate. And as you can see from this slide here, this picture here, the charge rate of the Model 3 is. In fact, on a Tesla supercharger, for example, it will peak out at 250 kilowatts an hour, which effectively adds, under certain circumstances, up to 175 miles in 15 minutes. Now, believe me, you can't even eat your sandwiches and have a cup of coffee in that time. And it's added probably 3 hours worth of driving time in a quarter of an hour. So it's impressive. It's still the benchmark in my opinion. In terms of practicality, the Model 3 has got an enormous amount of luggage space. You can probably see on the film here, which was actually taken from filming I did for our own Model 3. And I'll put a card at the end of the video if you're interested in our views on the Model 3 we did have. But yeah, you've got a big boot, the seats fold forward, you've got a big under boot, and you've got a big frunk fruit, whatever you want to call it, boot at the front. And yeah, enormous amount of carrying capacity. Okay, you had to juggle things around sometimes in soft bags to make the most of it, but hey, you would anyway. But yeah, a very, very practical car. Overall, would I recommend, or did I like the Tesla Model 3 long range? Yes, I very, very much liked it. It was a very nice car to drive. Probably the nicest car that I drove all day. I still think Tesla are probably the benchmark. You've got to like the minimalist interior, the no stalks, the central speedo thing with a map and the rest of it on the big screen in the middle. And if you don't like that, you're not going to like a Tesla. And that's fine. There are plenty of other choices out there of good quality cars at the same / cheaper or more expensive price points if you like that sort of thing. Personally, I think it's great. And yeah, I'd be very happy to have one of those on my drive. And to be fair, it's very tempting, although I really like my Model S. So, it's not significantly better and making me want to go and spend 50 grand. So there you go. I did like it a lot. Thank you so much for watching the film if you're still here. Please give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Feel free to share it and tell your mates about it. And you may even want to subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. I don't make any money out of it. This is not a monetized channel, even though you might have to watch adverts. I don't get anything out of it. And yeah, good stuff. So as I say, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Our Wolf is Wheels.